Well, thank you all for coming. We are the Gen Z panel. My name is Phil. I'll be the panel host. I'll be asking a couple questions to the folks here. Before we start, I just wanted to say, one, thank you all for coming. Thank you to Tiffany, because she put this together, and we're very hard to coordinate, so we appreciate you. And also, it's actually very humbling to be on stage today. I remember when I first met Matt, this was in 2015, and there were rumblings of the greater MSP community leaning in and listening to this new wave, this new voice, and to see all of this come together is really exciting. And so without further ado, we're going to have the panelists introduce themselves, and we're going to start over there with Lulu.
Hi everyone, I'm Lulu Bauermeister. I recently graduated from the University of Minnesota. Go CLA if you know what that is. And I am a corporate social responsibility project manager at US Bank. And the main theme that was on top of my mind when I graduated was positive impact. I'm a very passionate and energetic person, and I love coming into work, but what am I actually doing in my job, and what am I actually doing to have an impact in my community? And so that was kind of the main thing that was on my mind, since when you get a full-time offer, there is no deadline, there's no expiration, and so I really wanted to make sure that I was very passionate about the work that I do.
Hello, I'm Ollie Kaltoff. I use they, them, their pronouns. I'm a recent graduate of both Matamidi High School and Century College with my 2-year degree through PSEO, Post-Secondary Enrollment Option. And this fall I will be attending St. Kate's to get an English major. I currently have my own company that goes around to middle and high schools to give workshops on how to create a more safe and welcoming environment for their LGBT students. And I am a proud member of the Young Women's Cabinet that works through the Women's Foundation of Minnesota to lift up the voices of women across the state of Minnesota in our legislation. The thing that was on the top of my mind as I was graduating was, what am I going to do now? I had no idea how to navigate the financial aid world or how different St. Kate's is going to be from my community college that I went to. I had no idea how to navigate being a commuter on campus. I was just confused and concerned.
Hi, I'm Christian Moreno-Cova. I'm a rising junior at the University of Minnesota Duluth, and I just finished this summer. I was a summer business analyst at McKinsey & Company here in Minneapolis. One of the things that has been and is top of my mind as I look towards my graduation date is what I end up doing and what implications that has for me in the future. But the first internship I ever had was at the Science Museum of Minnesota, and I was teaching underprivileged youth STEM courses. And I loved it, and it was great and really rewarding work, but I knew as soon as that summer was done, I can't be a teacher. That's not for me. It's really, really important work, and I'm glad that there are people out there doing it, but I need to know that the work that I end up doing doesn't have implications on my work that's going to silo me, that's going to put me in a situation that maybe I don't want to be in or I'm not prepared to do as a person, as an individual, as a worker. So I'm really worried about, as I look to my time as a full-time employee wherever I end up, that work matches with my values, matches with my skills, and matches with what I'm passionate about.
Hello everyone, my name is Jasmine Logan. I graduated from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities last year in 2018. I'm actually a millennial, so that's pretty controversial that I'm up here with the Gen Z. Yeah, I'm on the cusp. But I work for the city of Minneapolis, where I worked all through my undergraduate career, both as a part-time employee and as an urban scholar, which is the program that I work for now. It's a regional internship program we wrapped up 2 days ago. So when I was graduating, what was at the top of my mind was job security. I went from having it when I graduated to finding out a few weeks later that the organization was changing and I wasn't going to have it anymore. And so it was a really, I had my internship that I was completing at the time, but I've never felt that magnitude of stress and anxiety before. And I had a great support system with my family and my friends, but I was a first-generation college student. And so I had the support, but my family hadn't been through what I was going through, and so just stress on stress on stress. I'm happy that I'm finally full-time employee now, but that security factor was a big thing for me.
And I'm Phil. I'm a transplant from Southern California, so I've been here for 8 years now. I came out to Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota. Liberal arts major. Any liberal arts majors in the house? Hey, there we go. And I run a tech startup called Homey. We're a hiring marketplace that connects companies with underrepresented, under-recruited, and undervalued talent. And so the reason I'm up here today is because a lot of my time is spent thinking through campus recruiting, Gen Z recruiting, and really the future of hiring. And the three trends that we're going to explore on this panel today are technology disrupting every job and changing the kinds of talent that companies need. Secondly, inclusion and diversity, and I say inclusion before diversity, is at the forefront of every recruiting conversation. And lastly, baby boomers are retiring and Gen Z is entering the workforce, starting really now. And so we'll just dive right into it. There's a lot of Fortune 500 companies used to go and they would hire business analysts. Right? They would go and they'd find juniors and they'd find anyone who knew Excel and could talk to people, and they would give them 60K, 70K jobs coming out of college, right? And that was the path from the Carlson School of Management straight to the Skyway. And now those jobs are changing, right? Companies are realizing that we don't need an army of business analysts if we can hire a couple software developers to write a script to automate that pricing model. And so the skill set they're looking for is really starting to change as well. And I'm so happy to have a great panel of liberal arts majors. We've got an English major, we've got a sociology, anthropology, African American studies major, economics, and we're going to dive into it. We're going to talk about what you've learned in your classes and your experiences that have really prepared you for work. And we'll start over there with Lulu.
Yeah, so I majored in psychology, and I was originally pre-med actually until my junior year. And the reason why I shifted into business is because almost every job revolves around people and helping and impacting other individuals. And I really think that in modern day society with so much technology, we forget to have those authentic conversations with different people. And oftentimes we have this mentality of it's us versus them, and what closes that gap is storytelling. And with people, every single person is coming into a different space with a different story. And I really enjoy psychology and the way that we can navigate forward and find those commonalities while acknowledging the differences.
Cool. And I'm just going to call on random people, and feel free to jump in if you want. Carlos, you're a jazz major, right? Jazz major, you want to tell us about that?
So I actually am a jazz piano major at the University of Minnesota Duluth, which I'm sure a lot of you recruiters probably don't run into too often when you're looking to find people. And at the jobs that I've worked at McKinsey and Company, last summer I was at US Bank. They didn't know what to make of it either. You know, I showed up day one, business analyst intern on my name tag, and they said, what do you make? You know, economics, management, what is it? And I said jazz piano. And the question then is, how am I developing skills that actually apply? And I'm really glad you kind of touched on the fact that we do, you know, the path has traditionally been hire these armies of business analysts to do this Excel work. You know, I showed up and they're like, do you know what Excel is? Do you know how to make a PowerPoint slide? But the unique thing about those experiences and about my experience in school is that things like Excel, things like PowerPoint, for this generation, we can all learn. We already know it or we can all learn it. We're all capable enough digitally to do it. The things that we learn in school that end up being more important then is the soft skills. It's about how do we use those things and then how do we apply that to the actual strategy that we're developing or the recommendations that we're making based off those analyses. The great thing about jazz is that we learn to think on our feet, we learn to improvise, and we learn to communicate through more than just words, right? I play with other musicians all the time, and the way we have conversations is through our instruments. How does that change? How does that apply to the business world? Well, I do a lot of work without actually seeing a lot of people day to day. I'm on my laptop, I work from home, whatever it is. I have to be able to have these meaningful conversations through these externalities, through different things that I'm doing. And I have to be able to make sure that the work that I'm doing ends up applying in a meaningful way. The recommendations that I'm doing are taking into account all these other things I'm seeing around me without necessarily getting the opportunity to sit down with somebody, say, have a 30-minute meeting in person. What does this mean? We don't have that kind of liberty as much anymore. We have to think on our feet a little bit. So.
Yeah, and I love how you touched on just the ability to learn, right? And I think that when you go to a liberal arts college or study liberal arts, they don't really learn anything super practical in the workforce. And we'll be honest about that. But the ability the learning how to learn and to express your ideas in clear and polished ways, and being able to write, like to be able to think, like those are so important. And so the next question, actually, I wanted to jump straight into the most popular question earlier, which is diversity. And not just diversity, but how do we create inclusive communities where traditionally underrepresented minority groups, in all senses, right, feel like they're welcomed within the workplace? Because I really do think that that's something that companies here are struggling with. And so maybe, Jasmine, you could tell us a little bit about your work with Urban Scholars and stuff like that.
Yeah, so like I said, I work for the Urban Scholars Program, which is a regional leadership and professional development program with an internship component. And so this year we grew to about 118 scholars across 11 partner organizations. And the key part of it, so obviously there is an internship component, but the key part of our programming that makes it unique is we do 1 day a week of training around leadership and professional development that's centered in racial equity, that's centered in identity and authentic expression of identity. And as Philip was talking about, as a Black woman, a Black young woman, like I said, I was first generation, low income, coming up in the public sector and stuff. You hear the buzzwords of equity, inclusion, and diversity and everything all the time, but you don't always see it play out, and we know that. We oftentimes, I'm the only one in the room, and the people there can feel really good about themselves because it's diverse all of a sudden, but they shouldn't feel good about themselves. It's not enough now to have a seat at the table and go on with the business. If I'm at the table and my voice isn't being called upon, if I'm not up to date with what's going on, if I'm not being genuinely included, I don't need to be there. It's just like I'm not there, And so really antagonizing what we think about and what we feel good about when we talk about, we have a diversity and equity team. But what is that team doing, and how are you using that to transform your organizational culture? I was talking with someone earlier about, we have our internship program, but we also train our supervisors, our leaders at those organizations around organizational culture shift, because that's what's going to retain people in the long run. I've had the privilege of working at the City of Minneapolis in a few different departments, and they've all been very different in terms of where they're at in their organizational culture, and that affects if I wanted to stay or not. That affects how good I felt about working there, if I felt like my values were being valued and represented. So I think in my job and then in my personal life, I'm always questioning, how am I not just doing equity work, but how am I letting that play out in all aspects? And I encourage every employer in here, every organization in here to do the same. Think about the teams you have in your organization, the initiatives you have, but how are you taking a step further? How are you checking yourself? How are you questioning how you're including the people that you're bringing in to retain them, but also to make them feel just as good as you feel working there? It was a kind of roundabout answer, but I think the gist of it is, again, going back to the point, it's not enough to feel good about bringing people to the table. Get rid of the table, make it something new and make it something that's actually different and shifting.
And we're done. Now, anyone else want to chime in on this?
I absolutely agree with what Jasmine just said. I think a good word to compile all of that together would be tokenism. Make sure that everyone who you have there, because you're trying to be more diverse, is being used, included, and paid the proper amount. And that you're not just bringing them in so they can sit there and look pretty and make you look good.
I just have one more thing. I think oftentimes in the DEI space, we are striving towards checking the box, which is what both Jasmine and Ollie were talking about. But the difficult part is what happens when we have multidimensional folks that are women, but they're also people of color and they're also queer. Like, what happens then, and how do we move forward and actually measure inclusion, which is the difficult part, because being included, like, how do you measure those feelings? And that's what I think that everyone is trying to work towards, so everyone feels a sense of belonging.
For sure. So I want to touch on this idea of networking. Oh, why are you all laughing? You seem like great networkers. You just cringed a little. Yeah. So I think networking is just a really, really interesting word, and it's, in a lot of ways, it's become kind of a dirty word in youth culture. And in my mind, networking was really invented by old rich white dudes at country clubs, right? You go for some golf, you play some tennis, you shake your hand, do a deal. And it's like, well, not all of us grew up at country clubs. Not all of us were taught how to build strong career relationships. And so when you come from a first-generation immigrant family, or when you are the first person in your family to go to college, no one tells you that you're supposed to go and build these lifelong relationships that are going to set you up for the rest of your career, which is what you're supposed to do. And I want to dive into that because I feel like we've all had our own journeys into that, right? Whether it's a mentor or a sponsor or someone who really just taught you how to sit at a table and have dinner well. Not good, well. No. Who wants to tackle that one?
I would love to talk a little bit about this. Networking is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. Ever since I was like 12 years old, I was going to Twin Cities Business Peer Network events with my dad, who's here in the audience actually. And because of that, I've gotten to see kind of firsthand what good networking looks like. And as I got older and I started to talk more with my peers and my colleagues about what networking meant to them, I kind of realized that a lot of people of my age who look like me kind of think networking is you have, the Rolodex of names, and then you like check off the box, I called this person this month, I sent them a message on LinkedIn this year, therefore I've networked with them, therefore they're part of my network. And it really isn't about that. It's about meeting new people and having a genuine interest in their lives and making sure that you have a genuine interest in their advancement as a person. When I reach out to somebody and I network with them, it's not, what have you been up to? Tell me what you're doing, then I've checked the box. It's this last thing that we talked about. How are things going in your life? Are you making progress towards the things you want to do? Are there things that you're facing struggles with? And if that's the case, how can I help you? I know people too. You know people too. We want to see each other succeed. How do we have that genuine interest in each other's true advancement as a person, as a professional? And how do we use that fact that we have this bond, that we have this network between us, that we can then advance each other's lives? And it's really about making sure that you have that genuine interest and connection in other people. And that's what the trouble is. We don't communicate that to young professionals. We don't tell them that's really what networking is about, and that's how you benefit from networking. It's not just you have a bunch of people, you have a bunch of followers on Instagram, therefore you're going to do well. It's really, once you have those genuine connections with people, if you are struggling, if you are not finding the opportunities that you are hoping to have, then you know who to reach out to. And actually, one of the reasons I'm here today is I've been really lucky to be involved with Greater MSP and things, and somebody I consider a great part of my network is Matt Lewis. And I wasn't able to make it to the intern event this year, although I went last year, and I was so bummed that I missed it. Reached out to Matt and I said, hey, I hope the intern event went great. I know it's a really important thing that you guys do, and I know how important it was to me when I went. Anything else that you guys have going on, I love to be a part of. I know the things that you guys are doing, really important to you. And he reached out to me and he said, hey, we have this panel going on, maybe you could attend, maybe you could be a part of it. And it's about those genuine connections that you make with people that allow you to improve yourself going forward, and hopefully it improves them going forward, whatever it is.
Sure, it was great networking with you.
I would completely agree with that. I think a lot of people, especially in my generation, tend to think of networking as like this big, terrifying thing that, oh, I have to dress up really nice and shake people's hand the right way and make eye contact. But really, it is just making a genuine relationship. It's basically just making a new friend in a bit more formal of a setting.
Absolutely. So the next question really is centered around kind of, well, you brought up Instagram, so we're going to go there, right? So social networks, it's another form of networking. And when you really look into it, it almost feels like networking now is becoming who's better at flexing on LinkedIn, right? Really. It's about, are you a thought leader? Are you... Hey, don't laugh at thought leaders. They're important people. But it's true, right? It feels like no one works anymore. Everyone just sits around on LinkedIn and likes and reshares posts. And how do we really dive into that and figure out how do we tackle this new wave? How do we maintain our authentic voice? And how do we just be real? Because I know a lot of you on LinkedIn, and none of you are real. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, let's dive into it, right? Let's talk about how do you build an authentic brand for yourself as a professional on the internet. Anyone? Takers? No?
I think it's important to first kind of take some time to not reach out and try and get those likes and find a brand per se, but rather to take a step back and try and find what your core beliefs and your core values are before you dive into letting that be known to the world. A while ago, I just cut myself off from all social medias. I deleted everything. I didn't go on them. And I had a friend say around me a few months ago, some people just have the privilege of not paying attention to what's going on. And that really hit me, and I took a step back. I took a moment to think about why I deleted all of these different social media accounts, and I thought about how my core values had developed over time, and I decided to get back on. And I followed the people that I could agree with on my core values, that I could retweet, that I could like, that I could let known to the world, this is what I believe in, this is where I'm gonna plant my stake and not move. And from that, I think I was able to not only create a healthier place for myself, but also to better brand myself instead of stumbling around in the dark.
For sure. So while you're talking, you mentioned your side hustle earlier, right?
My what?
The business you built.
Yes.
And so we all have 9 to 5s, right? We're all working on. We have work, but then from 5 to 9, right? That's your chance to live your life, to live your best life. And I want to talk about these side hustles because I think that in a lot of ways they make us who we are, because these are our passions, this is what we care about. And really in an ideal world, we would just be doing what we care about and what we love, because then you wake up in the morning and it's not like going to work, you're just doing what you love. So you want to tell us a little bit about your business and how you started it?
Yeah, so I was part of my high school's GSA, Gender Sexuality Alliance, and we were really hoping to do something more with the GSA that year, because what we had really just been at the time was a safe place for students to come and just hang out during lunchtime and be themselves and not have to worry about the onslaught of terror that was the high school lunchroom. And so we were trying to find something to do, and we asked, as the presidents or leaders, we asked the students what they wanted to get done, or what were their concerns about the high school and navigating it as an LGBT student. And a lot of them started bringing up how teachers were turning their backs on LGBT-related slurs, how in the classrooms they were teaching the LGBT-related lessons as though there weren't any students in there who identified as queer. And so from that, we decided that with the teacher workshop day coming up, we should build something around that. And so we compiled a list of issues that students were facing and solutions that they had to those issues. And we presented it to the teachers, and it was surprisingly well received. A little background on my high school. We are known as the most private public school in the area. We are very middle to upper class, white, cis, straight, abled people, and it's really difficult to navigate as a minority of any kind. And so having such a positive and interactive reaction from the teachers and staff that day was like a miracle from I don't know where. So from that, I decided, this happens in a lot of other places with a lot of other issues, and I can bring this around and try and do some good while I wait for someone else to give me a job. So that's how it kind of started.
Sure. Can we just all appreciate that Ollie is, what, like 19-ish? Yeah, I don't know what you were doing when you were 19, but I was working at Jamba Juice. And what's cool about tech, what's cool about the internet is it's given us a voice, right? It's given everyone a voice. Some voices are louder than the others, some voices we don't like to hear, but everyone has a voice. And I want to talk to you, Jasmine, about being a voice in the community, specifically being like a badass woman of color who's really trailblazing and setting the tone and inspiring others to be like you and just showing that it's possible. So can you talk a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, sorry. I think what's been interesting about my academic path and my career path so far. I mean, I'm only just over a year into the full-time professional world, but the new thing I'm navigating is this sense of, like I said, I'm a first-generation student. I'm working in government where none of my family's ever been able to work in before. I'm working in a whole new sector, a whole new area, and it's amazing because I'm able to take what I learned in school. I studied sociology of law and criminology and Afro studies, and so I'm very theory-based. I can critically analyze anything. I know all the buzzwords and everything. And I do that all, and I wanted to do all of that because of my community and what I went through, the people who weren't able to come with me, my own cousins, my own friends who I grew up with who weren't able to go on this path with me due to things that were out of their control. And that's what brought me here, but something that I constantly have to ground myself in is understanding that when I go back then to my community, I'm not speaking the same language as them. They're talking about these issues, but through their own experiences and their own narratives. And so when I go home, I'm not talking about the frameworks of equity and critical that's not how I'm talking because that's not how we're living. And so being able to navigate that bridge of okay, it's weird, I'm in a new class, I'm in a different social class than what I came from and where my family is and where my community is at. And it's hard because sometimes I feel so disconnected doing the thing that I did because I wanted to give back to them, And so I think as somebody, I don't consider myself a voice of the community. I know I have in some way that role now, but I think it's critical as young people of color, as community leaders or visionaries or whatever you want to call yourself, that we also recognize the privilege in being able to be in spaces like this. I get to come and be on panels and talk about all these cool things with you all, but then that's not how I talk when I go home. It's not how I talk in my community, and you have to be able to do both so that you can bring their needs to the front, but so that I can communicate in a room like this and that you all understand where I'm coming from. So I don't know if that completely answers your question, but I think part of being a community voice is navigating the new privilege you have to be able to do that and ground yourself within that.
For sure, and you touched on such an important topic around navigating this corporate world because you don't grow up with it, right? It's the soft skills, all these things that you need to understand. But on the flip side, as the people who are running HR or recruiting, your job is to make people within your organization feel welcome and included. And it's really hard to do that when you don't have the same experiences as them. It's hard to understand someone's background if you haven't walked in their shoes before. And just to be able to understand those differences, though, is so important. For example, we had a Muslim employee, and he was fasting for Ramadan. And when you're fasting, you can't drink water, right? There's nothing. And I was like, man, this sounds tough. I'll do it with you for a couple days. That was tough. And it made me understand what it's like to not drink coffee for 3 days and then crash. But at the end of the day, it's more than about making your Muslim employees feel welcome at corporate happy hours. It's going and fasting with them and then breaking fast and having biryani at their house because that's how you truly understand. We have a few minutes left. I want to squeeze in one last question. And this is, I think, really, really relevant to folks in the room because we have been using the same hiring frameworks, career fairs, campus recruiting, job postings, ATS systems, you know the drill. And things are changing, right? Because you can't apply the same frameworks you use to hire baby boomers to this new internet generation. They're looking for completely different things. They're in completely different places. only 29% of 18 to 24-year-olds are on LinkedIn. That means 71% of your target market is not where you're looking for them. So let's talk a little bit about how you feel about going to career fairs, how you feel about the traditional campus recruiting, walking up to a stranger, shaking their hand, chit-chatting for 30 seconds and getting told to apply online. Right? How was that experience for you as a candidate?
Do you want to see?
I just want you to talk about how you would want to be recruited, because these folks are trying to figure out how do we attract this new generation and how do we retain them.
I am a firm believer in connection before content. So what is our personal relationship like? I value trust and loyalty, and within my own network of friends and colleagues, I would prefer to have some sort of knowledge around you before like meeting you. So for instance, getting involved in speaking at a career fair or like speaking at like a student organization, I think those are good ways to interact with folks. But then also it's talking about like your company's reputation that you have among my peers and among my friends.
I think that the company reputation part is huge, and I don't want to talk about it too much with in regards to McKinsey and Company. But in consulting in general, one of the big issues that we face is that we have many clients from many sectors, and a lot of different companies do work that is great for the world, and a lot of companies do work that isn't so great. So, you know, when I go back and I face my friends and I say, these are the companies that I'm looking at recruiting with, sometimes I'm faced with the questions like, is that really something you want to align yourself with? So when I think about recruiting, I want to make sure that the things that I'm associating myself with, again, kind of match my values, and that this company has to come in understanding where they're coming from. You as a recruiter are not just yourself. You don't represent yourself or your undergraduate recruitment team. You represent your organization as a whole, and you need to understand what that kind of means for you, what that brand means coming in, because that's how I am going to interpret it when you come and we have those conversations.
I would add to both as a student what I valued and then now doing recruiting for my job, being more intentional about going beyond like, oh, I'm going to recruit at Century College. We saw better results when we intentionally recruit in their Women in STEM group or their BSU or their Asian Student Association. And as a student, that was more meaningful to me too. I was more comfortable, I felt safer in a way, reaching back out to people who came in to recruit at our Multicultural Center for Excellence versus somebody who I met at a career fair, just because there's this kind of show of intentionality and then just also that safe space that I'm already in when you're coming to me to recruit. That makes me feel much more comfortable reaching back out in those situations. So I think what you all are doing is great, but then adding that extra layer of going deeper into some of those like schools or organizations to see where are the actual pockets of people who don't always get to go to career fairs and don't always get to hear from you in traditional recruiting settings, being intentional about some of that work.
Sure.
Sorry.
Ollie?
I'm going to agree with what everyone said and add on to what Jasmine just said by saying making it more accessible would be wildly amazing. Just having interpreters or accessible spaces, putting pronouns on name tags, and like Jasmine was saying, making sure that there are people there that make us and our identities and our existence in that moment feel safe.
Yeah, and I mean, that really is the common thread, right? Treat people like people, right? Hiring is and has always been about people. And I think that, you know, if you're deliberate about that, then everything falls into place. So we have a few minutes left. We want to open it up to questions. Any burning questions? Future of work, future of hiring? A lot of thought leaders up here.
I got business cards if any of y'all want them.
We're not supposed to use business cards. That's for old people. I'm kidding. Yes.
I'm an old person.
No.
The thing is, this is the bigger question for you. As a boomer and I'm moving along, are you seeing Gen Xers really behaving differently? We don't do well as boomers, and I worked in all my recruitment was on the old paradigm. But do you see Gen X hiring, and that's some of the people in this room, behaving differently?
Yeah, I'll jump into that. I feel sorry. How do we feel about Gen X? Which no one ever talks about Gen X, right? Yeah. No one ever talks about Gen X. It's almost like they're forgotten because you just go from baby boomers to bashing on avocado toast, and then Gen Z, right? And I think that's a really, really good question because as baby boomers retiring, Gen X is going to fill those spots. And I feel like there's a bit split, right? You still have you have a bunch of woke ones, right? The ones that really get it. And then you have some people who it's like, how are you still here? Right? And I really do, at the end of the day, think that the younger people are, the people entering the workforce are going to have a voice and going to be part of the decisions that are being part of the company. And that is just what has to happen in order for a company to evolve and adapt. So.
I think just going to the hiring part in terms of who's hiring now, there are a lot of people who are aware and want to make the hiring better, but with that, you need to advocate for the hiring systems to actually change. And so I think that's where a lot of the disparities still exist. You have people who want to do good and they're hiring and are recruiting more diverse candidates, but then they get into the hiring room and it's the same system that's used, the same questions. So kind of to Ali's point earlier, simple things that can be interwoven into your hiring systems, whether that's changing your questions to include things about that person's identity, whether that's including gender pronouns, like as you introduce yourselves in the room, simple things like that make a big difference and show that your organization overall is also wanting to change with the new coming generation coming in. So.
For sure, and just touching on culture, right? Culture is a word that's thrown around a lot, and everyone's got a great culture. But if you really think about it, like for a lot of these older, especially financial services companies, we're going to pick on you. It was typically invented by a college-educated, likely Harvard guy, right? And that's just how it worked. And when he started the company, he looped in his other Harvard friend, and then they diversified by going to Princeton, right? And it's like, and so you've created this culture, which is really the sum of your people. And so when a candidate goes to your company and they're told, you're not a good culture fit, what are you really telling them? I'm just gonna leave you with that. Any other questions? One more. Ooh, who should we pick? She seems very excited. We could do two more. All right, both of you.
You guys talked about like stability and loyalty and risk of recession, but also like the importance of change and growth and advancement. What is the one thing that employers can do that would be significant to you to want to stay?
Oh, I can speak in.
Hit him, Lulu.
Do you want to?
Oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry. So there's a lot of conversation about stability, and really the question is asking, what can we as employers do to make you want to stay at the company?
So I'm someone who's bounced around in different industries already. I was in the sports industry and medicine and healthcare, and now I'm in banking, which is odd. But I think the one thing that has really been very influential in my decision to either stay at a company is my personal relationship with my manager. If my manager is very invested in my personal growth and my career growth, I am much more likely to stay at the company. And that goes in terms of the entire team too. But I would say even if all of the other factors are shifting and flexible and adapting, that if there's consistency in my relationship with my manager, that really helps.
Cool. And so I just a quick question for kind of following up on that. I think that the millennials are really, they're one of the most impactful things that ever happened to the millennials was 9/11, right? It was this moment where you realized the world could end at any moment, and it was a very existential moment. And to be honest with you, I don't really remember 9/11 because I was like 6. Anyone here remember 9/11? Like, they really felt the impact of like what it was. And so millennials here kind of get it, but really what happened for Gen Z was when you went home in 2008 and mommy and dad were like, daddy just lost his job. Life is going to be different. And it's the moment when you realize the institution has failed you as a person, because the institution doesn't care about you, right? You're a cog in this giant machine. And at the end of the day, you're looking out for yourself. And so that really is a prevailing sense of identity for Gen Z folks. And to answer your question of what a company can do, just treat your employees like real people. All right. Okay. Last question.
Yeah, so you kind of talked about how career fairs are, like, you keep doing the same thing, expecting different results.
Sure.
And so looking to do, what would that different thing look like for you? Because I think, I mean, you have our ears right now, right?
Yeah.
So how would that look different and I mean, because I think you all kind of talked about how you like to connect with people, but I guess my question is, what would you want to see be done differently if you got to make a recommendation?
Yeah. Well, I'm biased because I run a hiring marketplace, and like our whole thing is like adding and augmenting career fairs. So I have a lot of things to say on that. But I think really at the end of the day, it's you as a young person, the two things, and check me if I'm wrong here, the two things you really care about coming out of college is money, like you got to pay your bills, and your student loans. Oh, we forgot to talk about student loans. How did we forget that? So it's getting paid and then learning. And learning happens in a lot of different ways. Exposure to new experiences, great mentors, the opportunity to travel and see the world. And those are really all the things you're looking for coming out of college. And as a freshman, you've already made up your mind on where you want to go, right? Because all the seniors are going to McKinsey and Bain and BCG and Accenture, and that to you is prestige, that's success. And so that's where the brand comes in. But really what companies need to do is they need to lean in with their employees, because your employees are the best resource you have to share your story. And if I am a freshman and I'm starting to talk to an alum who is also from the same background, also studied jazz music, also understands what I go through, then when I get that junior summer analyst position offer, I might consider working at an insurance company rather than McKinsey or Goldman, because I have someone there who actually cares about me and who's going to take me under their wing and show me the ropes, and that's what's really important. And so if the more companies can do and lean in there, the better.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I really love everything you've said. And one of the things that I have found really important when I've been, going through recruiting and looking at what companies I want to apply for, you as recruiters are there because you get paid to do it. I mean, I'm sure you have a passion for it and all those things. At the end of the day, it is your job to recruit us, and I appreciate that and I understand that. The most impactful communication I can have about a position or about a company is when not only somebody who works there, but maybe an alumni of your company tells me about, when I mention to them that I'm considering your company, if they have something good to say about it, if they have something positive or anything impactful about your company to say. When I have those types of communications, because I know that's coming from a genuine place, that they've spent time at your organization and what they've learned at your organization taught them that it was an organization that cared about their people, and it's the type of place that they would recommend then to their friends, to their colleagues. So if you have a population within your company, the best way to recruit new people is to make sure the people within your company enjoy it there. The people within your company are within an environment that encourages them to be the best people they can, to improve as a person, to improve as a professional. Then whenever they go to that next organization, they're not looking at themselves as, okay, I used to be with this company, now our relationship ends here, but rather, I'm an alumni of this organization. The things I learned there, the values that they held, shaped me as a person, and whoever I share that information with going forward will understand that too, because it had that much of an impact on me, because this organization cared that much about me as an individual that I can safely recommend it to the next person I come across.
I would agree with that and harken back again to make these events accessible in all the ways that I had listened previously. And as Phil was saying, and Christian was touching on, was have the people who work at your place that you're recruiting for, or students at the place you're recruiting for, have them come along with you, or have them come on their own. I don't mean to kick any of you out of your job, but have them come along so I can see what I'm getting myself into. One of the things that I asked every single student that I visited on my college tours was, what's your least favorite thing about this college? Because if it's something like, oh, not many people are around on the weekends, if that's the worst thing about this college, this is going to be great. And I also am able to get an honest and more personal opinion from them than, what's your favorite part of this college? Oh, well, it's perfect. I love everything. The teachers are really engaging. Everyone's super nice. You know, it's kind of genuine versus fake.
I think that surveying the folks that you already have is a great indicator of what you're doing well and what you need to improve upon, because oftentimes they're seeing it from the other side of the perspective of how they were recruited and what went well, and what you could do differently, and they might have better suggestions that are more specific and catered to your specific organization.
Awesome. Well, we're going to end it there. Thank you all for listening. Really appreciate it. And another hand for Great RMSB.